Have you ever sat in, let's say, church, and they're talking about prayer, and they're saying, hey, here's how you can communicate with God. It's through bowing your head and thinking or saying the words, and that communicates with God. And you're like, how on earth does that even work? How would that even work? Or let's say that you're just sitting there and you're thinking about something, and then all of a sudden your friend says, hey, I was thinking about this. And you're like, I was just barely thinking. How did you think about that same thing? And you might just attribute that to luck or coincidence or a supernatural or spiritual, and you can't define how it actually works, or it's just magical. Things like that just happen. Who knows how? Well, in this book, Think and Grow Rich, you might call it supernatural, superstition, or whatever you want to call it, but Napoleon breaks down how each of those things work, how the sixth sense works in our life. I'm not going to be able to even go over nearly most of the book, 90% of the book. I'm just going to be scratching the surface for you, showing you 3 lessons that I've learned, but there's so many more lessons, so you have to read the book for yourself. But with that said, let's go into my 3 lessons to get you an idea of what the book is about, okay? Lesson number 1 is a burning desire. Now, this is the very first chapter of the book for a reason. And going back to that supernatural, that lucky stuff of some people, they want luck just to happen, or that if they just say affirmations every day, then it's just going to happen. No, Napoleon Hill is a big proponent of personal responsibility. You have to be the one that makes these things happen in your own life, okay? Now, with that said, he also has specific strategies on how you can, for instance, use prayer or use other people or use masterminds to accomplish those things. But before all of that stuff, the very first chapter is have a burning desire. He tells the story of this guy named Edwin C. Barnes. And this guy lived back in the 1800s. I mean, this book was written, I think it was written like 1935 or something. And so it wasn't too far away from Thomas Edison's time. And this guy really wanted to work with Edison. He was the Elon Musk of his day. But he didn't know him. He didn't have any connections to him. But he had this burning desire inside. And he tried and tried and tried. But no matter what he did, he just kept on failing. He couldn't get an opportunity to work with him. He kept that feeling for years, this desire to work with Thomas Edison. Well, finally, after many, many years, he finally got his chance, and he worked directly with Thomas Edison on I believe it was marketing one of his products. He's like, hey, I built up this marketing company because I wanted to work with you. Now here's my chance. Hey, what if I market your product? And Thomas Edison was like, great, let's work together, right? So he had this burning desire even for years. And sometimes, a lot of times, we won't be able to see the fruits of our labor until many, many years down the road. But if we keep that burning desire with us, then we will be able to see those fruits of our labor. Lesson number 2 is the subconscious mind. Now, when I say subconscious, right, it's things that are just working without us. The conscious is like I'm actively thinking about these things. Subconscious is it's just going on its own. I'm not actively doing it. It's passive. It's going on without me even thinking. When I sleep at night, when I breathe during the day, when I blink, that's subconscious things that are going on, right? I don't have to think about them. Well, he tells this story of this guy. Essentially, it's the story of this guy, Dr. Elmer R. Gates. And I'll just tell you what he did first, and then the lesson is take away from it. Essentially, what he would do is he was a scientist and inventor, just like Thomas Edison. Pretty much like the same caliber as Thomas Edison, and they lived at the same during the same time. And most people think that scientists and inventors sit down and they mathematically go through all these equations, and maybe some of them do, but what Dr. Gates did was different. What he would do is he would go into a room, a dark room by himself, and he would close his eyes for hours, and he would just think. He would put, and he said that he would put, and he wrote a book about this, he would put the problems out into the universe, he said. He said, I just put the problems out there. Here's what I'm trying to solve. And then he just let the, you could say universe. I'm having a hard time explaining because it sounds a little crazy unless you actually have experience with it. You know, it's very similar to a spiritual experience. It's hard to explain to somebody unless they've also had the same type of experience, you know, because it sounds a little crazy, but I'll just tell you what he did. So he puts these ideas out, lets the universe just problem solve for him. And he said that ideas would come to his mind that he'd never before thought of. You know, he'd never thought of them before in his life. And equations would come to his mind, ways of solving the problem. And Napoleon Hill talks about this, and he calls it a collective mind, that all the ideas from everyone on the earth come together in one. And it's like this one area, that collective, he calls it a collective mind, where all these ideas are there together. And all you have to do is put your idea out there, a problem you want to solve, and ideas will come into your mind of, wait, here's how you can solve this, here's how you can solve this. And he said right now people might call it magic, or might call it different names, but he said very soon we will be able to know the science behind prayer, the science behind how ideas travel through our universe. And he talks about thoughts traveling faster than the speed of light. It's a very interesting concept, and whether you agree with how it works, whether it's spiritual or not, the bottom line is that it works. If that you have problems, you sit down, you think, and let's just say you think that it's your own mind who's solving those problems, great. You think that it's the conscious mind of all the minds in the world together that solve the problem. Either way, it's still going to work for you, okay? So that's the story of Dr. Gates. Now, lesson number 3, takeaway number 3, this was very, very powerful, is the power of mastermind. Now, he has 2 quotes that I'd like to read. Very good. One of them is, no two minds ever come together without creating a third invisible, intangible force which might be likened to a third mind. It's that concept I've talked about before. If you have 2 oxen, you have one ox over here that can pull 1,000 pounds, another ox over here that can pull 1,000 pounds. When you put them together, they can pull 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 8,000 pounds together. So you're stronger when you're yoked together. And Napoleon Hill says when you have 2 minds together, every time it creates an invisible, intangible third mind. And it doesn't make sense logically, but it works in practice. And he talks about this power, the power of a mastermind. When you get a group of like-minded people together that think similarly, he calls that a mastermind. His definition is the coordination of knowledge and effort between 2 or more people who work towards a definite purpose in a spirit of harmony. Now, if you're clashing with one another, then it's not going to work out. You have to be in a spirit of harmony towards a definite purpose. Okay? So he explains in his personal life that he started these experiments. He was kind of an experimenter himself, a scientist in a way himself, like a psychologist, I guess you could say, himself. And he describes having these mastermind sessions with his idols, with the people that he aspired to be like. He had people in there like Abraham Lincoln, Thomas Edison, Napoleon Bonaparte, and like a couple other guys, people I really looked up to. I think Mahatma Gandhi was in there as well. So he was meeting with these guys, meaning that I think half of them were like dead, if not more. But he would meet with them in his mind. So he would sit down, he'd close his eyes and imagine each of them coming into a room in detail, sitting down and talking with them. And he said pretty soon, so each time he met with these guys, which again, it sounds weird. I know, don't get weirded out about it. It's just, whether you think it's spiritual, whether you think that it's just your own mind doing it, either way, it works, okay? So don't judge. So he sat down with these guys, and he would ask them questions. What do you think about this? Here's this problem I'm going through my life. How would you solve this problem? And they would answer the questions. And he said the more and more he did it, the more and more personality they started to develop. And so he would sit down. And Abraham Lincoln, he had this tendency of, he wouldn't sit down. He would walk around the room. He would pace the room. And he'd never met Abraham Lincoln in his life, but he would pace the room. And Thomas Edison, he would always be the first one to speak, and he would be the loudest about his points. And Napoleon Bonaparte, he was always wanting to pick fights with people. And these guys started developing these personalities, and they started to actually solve his problems, his real life problems in his life. Well, it got to the point where he kind of got weirded out. He kind of got freaked out about it. And so he stopped having these meetings, and he stopped for several months. Well, one night, he had a dream that Abraham Lincoln came to him and said, Napoleon, you have a calling in this world. You need to start up these masterminds again, and you have a great work to perform. And next morning he woke up, and he actually called Thomas Edison, who is still alive, and he told him about it. And he said, Thomas Edison told Napoleon Hill, he said, you might not realize, but that experience that you had last night might be more real than you think. And he was like, wow. So he started having these masterminds again. Well, he ends up writing the book, Think and Grow Rich, which is probably the #1 best-selling book for business and self-help ever. Probably the #1 book, okay? So these principles, again, I'm gonna keep on repeating it because it's important. They might seem a little weird. Go, okay, whether you think that it's actually happening or you think that it's a different way, either way, these principles work. And I'm sure you've seen these things happen in your life, where things that you can't explain happen in your life. When I read this book, it put the unexplainable and gave it logic. And I said, oh, that makes perfect sense. I actually understand how that works now. And actually help me understand and put those things into practice. Now, my challenge to you is go ahead, read Think and Grow Rich. And I would honestly love to hear your thoughts on Think and Grow Rich. If you think that it's completely crazy or you think that it works, nobody can dispute that these principles work, and they actually when they actually make you rich. And I love that he actually he does focus on money, but he focuses on making yourself rich with family and friends and wealth to help your family and friends, all the things that actually make your life better. That's what riches truly are. It's how much better is your life off, okay? So go ahead, my challenge, read this book, Think and Grow Rich, and then 2, continue to read one educational book every single week. I have a book list down below. I'm going to put the link down below to my website. I have hundreds of books on there, so go ahead, check it out, and I will see you next time.